Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Russia, the land where reality is as malleable as a Kremlin press release. Take, for example, the enigmatic reporter Pavel Zorobin, the enterprising journalist who just happened to be strolling through the corridors of power and accidentally bumped into none other than Vladimir Putin himself. What impeccable timing. And wouldn't you know it, this chance encounter occurred just before the United States agreed to let Ukraine use missiles offensively. It's almost as if the whole scene was scripted, or perhaps that's giving it too much credit for originality. Zarubin eagerly reminds us, in connection with the latest news about Western long-range missiles, I recall what the president answered to this question just 3 weeks ago on October 25th. How thoughtful of him to jog our memories. It's fascinating how these spontaneous interviews always circle back to well-rehearsed talking points. One might suspect that the Russian state media is less about journalism and more about theatrical performances, complete with stage directions and cue cards.
Украинские войска не могут применять это оружие самостоятельно. Это могут делать только специалисты стран НАТО, потому что нужна для этого космическая разведка, которой у Украины, естественно, нет, мы это понимаем. Нужны специалисты, которые будут на основе данных этой разведки вводить полетные задания и целый ряд других манипуляций совершать. Это самостоятельно украинская армия делать не в состоянии, не может. Поэтому и то, что сейчас происходит, это делается все руками натовских офицеров. Вопрос только в том, разрешат они сами себе наносить удары вглубь российской территории или нет. Вот в этом вопрос. Ну и, естественно, мы должны быть на это соответствующим образом реагировать. Как реагировать, когда, где конкретно, ну, об этом пока рановато говорить. Но, разумеется, наше военное ведомство над этим думает и будет предлагать различные варианты ответов.
Meanwhile, not to be outdone in the theater of the absurd, North Korea is gearing up for war. But not with their usual target of choice, their southern neighbors. No, this time the communists in Pyongyang are dreaming bigger. They're fantasizing about conquering Europe side by side with Russia. Because when two pariah states join forces, what could possibly go wrong? It's touching to see such camaraderie and aspirations of outdated imperialism. It's almost comical how Russia and North Korea believe that these grandiose displays will intimidate the world. Perhaps they think that parading around scripted encounters and making bold threats will distract from the realities at home, like economic struggles and internal sanctions. Or maybe they genuinely believe their own propaganda, in which case one might advise a reality check or at least a new scriptwriter. Back at the Kremlin, Putin continues his role as the unflappable leader, always coincidentally available for a soundbite that just so happened to align perfectly with the state's narrative. And the propagandists LARP it up, disseminating these orchestrated moments as if they were candid insights. It's a well-oiled machine, but the squeaks are becoming increasingly audible to the rest of the world. So here we are, watching this elaborate puppet show where the strings are visible and the puppeteers aren't as clever as they think. The audience is growing wary of the predictable plot twists and recycled lines. Perhaps it is time for the Kremlin to consider that genuine dialogue and transparent actions might be more effective than poorly staged performances. In the end, the joke's on them. While they orchestrate these charades, the international community sees through the facade. The more they double down on these tactics, the more they isolate themselves. It's high time they realize that in the global theater, authenticity earns the standing ovation, not hollow theatrics. Lukashenko graces us yet again with his apparels of wisdom. Europe is ripe and Russia is ready for it, he declares, as if unveiling a master plan that will reshape the continent. One can help but wonder, ripe for what exactly? Perhaps ripe for rolling their eyes at the antics of a leader who seems blissfully unaware that his season in the sun expired decades ago.
Де Голля, вот их Ширак был мужик настоящий за народ, ну настоящий мужик от французов, как француз. Сейчас таких нет, все дрожат. А чего дрожать? Дешевые ресурсы в России, технологии в Германии. Нужно принимать решение, двигаться в этом направлении. Европа для этого созрела. И Россия готова к этому. Зачем нам ссориться белорусам, россиянам с ним? Все движется к этому. Просто надо немножко терпения. Надо время.
It's almost charming how Lukashenko and Putin fancy themselves masters on the world stage. They speak of readiness as if Russia is poised to lead a grand charge into the future, when in reality they're struggling to keep the lights on, both figuratively and literally. Meanwhile, Europe is preoccupied with, pesky little things like innovation and democracy. Putin, ever the strategist, must be delighted to have his Belarusian echo amplifying these grandiose notions. It's like watching a ventriloquist and his dummy, each convinced that they're the one doing the talking. They reminisce about the good old days, seemingly unaware that the rest of the world has moved on from their brand of geopolitics. Russia being ready is a statement rich with irony. Ready for another round of sanctions? Ready to further isolate itself on an international stage? Or perhaps they're ready to double down on policies that have turned it into a cautionary tale rather than a role model. The notion that Europe is waiting with bated breath for Russia's next move is as quaint as it is disconnected from reality. So here's to Lukashenko and Putin. May they continue to bestow upon us their unsolicited proclamations. After all, every comedy needs its characters, and they seem more than happy to oblige. Now, here's the art of diplomacy in action. In the midst of a raging war with Russian missiles graciously landing on Kharkiv and other eastern Ukrainian cities, Chancellor Olaf Scholz decided it's perfect moment to give his old buddy Putin a ring, because nothing says support for Ukraine like a casual chat with, the man orchestrating the chaos. Perhaps they hadn't caught up in a while and needed to discuss pressing matters like the latest advancement in pipeline sabotage or tips on energy blackmail.
Путин рассказал Шольцу детально о нашем видении происходящего, о возможных перспективах развития ситуации и так далее. И Шольц возобновил свою позицию, собственно, которая хорошо известна, которая повторяется как мантра всеми европейскими представителями по нескольку раз в день.
Вот официальный представитель Кабмина ФРГ сообщает, что канцлер настаивал на готовности России к переговорам с Украиной. Россия разве не готова?
Да, эта готовность, собственно, она неоднократно повторялась. Вы знаете, июньское выступление президента, где он четко обозначил обстоятельства, которые могут стать предтечей для урегулирования этого конфликта. Все это фигурировало на повестке дня состоявшегося телефонного разговора.
Now, one might expect that the leader of one of the largest EU and NATO countries would prioritize solidarity and decisive action over friendly banter. But nah, a phone call to a friend takes precedence, even as civilians are under attack. It's reassuring to know that while Ukrainians face aggression, Scholz ensures that line of communication with the aggressor remains warm and open. And let's not forget, Austria, a nation that has long enjoyed a cozy relationship with Russian interests, they've been the eager recipient of Kremlin energy, turning a blind eye to the strings attached. But now they're learning the hard way that relying on a regime that weaponizes resources isn't the smartest move. Decades of cooperation went up in smoke in just 3 days. Perhaps the only lasting souvenir is a tarnished reputation and a cautionary tale about the perils of appeasement.
Wir lassen uns von niemandem erpressen, auch nicht vom russischen Präsidenten. Wir lassen uns von der putinschen Regierung, von Putin selbst nicht in die Knie zwingen, sondern haben eben genau aus diesem Grund so vorgesorgt, dass wir wehrhaft sein können, wehrhaft im Sinne auch unserer Demokratie, wehrhaft auch im Sinne des Versprechens für Freiheit, Demokratie und Rechtsstaatlichkeit.
It's almost poetic how some leaders believe that pandering to a predatory Kremlin will yield positive results. Maybe next time they'll realize that sycophancy is a poor substitute for principled leadership. After all, cozying up to anyone with a track record of content rarely ends well. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.